McClellan.
All right, that's a pretty good one.
You like that one?
I do like that one. How you doing, Alejandro?
Not too bad. Of course, we're all busy with the Congress coming up.
Exciting yet stressful time.
Yeah, very exciting though. Lots of people coming, and a lot of our friends that we've only met online, so we haven't actually met face to face before. So that's kind of cool. It seems like more UFO researchers and stuff like that that we talk with are coming this year than ever, which makes sense. I mean, everybody wants to hear what Bob Lazar has to say.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, but I'm really looking forward to the conference this year.
Mm-hmm. And thank you to Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, both of whom will be speakers, because they were on Coast to Coast talking about us this weekend.
So nice of those guys.
Yeah, so they're super excited, and of course we all are. But I want to get into who's our guest this week, and we have Michael J.S. Carter. We had him on before talking about aliens in the Bible. He's a reverend. He actually is a chaplain at a couple of hospitals, and he's really into the topic. In fact, he feels he's an experiencer. So he talks about aliens in the Bible, translating some of the Bible stories as possible extraterrestrials, stuff like that. He's been on Ancient Aliens quite a few times talking about this sort of thing. And he has a new book called A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness. Deep stuff, huh, Jason?
So deep. So deep.
So we talked to him about this stuff. He's a lot of fun. This guy's just really a cool dude. I could see how he'd be great at giving, his lectures and his speeches and very inspiring. So it's kind of like a self-help episode this week. So,
and as anyone who listens to this show knows, we're big fans of cool dudes.
Yeah, we like cool dudes. And crazy dudes too.
That's right. Yep. That's why you like me.
Cool and crazy. That's how we like them.
Absolutely.
All right. So, how was your week, Jason?
Week was great, my friend. How about you?
Not too bad. Pretty good. Got a lot done. More coming up. Very excited about interviews that I've got coming up in the future, but also the news. There's been some really cool news going on, so why don't we get to it? What's your favorite news story of the week, my friend?
Well, I want to talk about a new UFO movie coming out. There seemed to be a wave of those coming out again. There always are, just a flood of UFO content that Hollywood seems to pump out. But this one is taking an interesting approach, I think. I find it fascinating. What these people are doing is they're creating basically a faux documentary. They're presenting this film like a documentary, but it's not actually a documentary. It's on par with what the Science Channel does with their Are We Alone Week, where they create this scenario of, hostile aliens coming to Earth and what people would do, how people would react, what actions would be taken by, various groups. So that's kind of the premise with this. It's called The Visit, an Alien Encounter. And what they're doing is presenting this idea that first contact is taking place. And it talks with, it's set up like in a documentary format, showing actual people who might actually be the ones dealing with a situation like this. So astrobiologists, people from NASA, people from the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs. And, some people might remember this from, I believe, back in 2010. One of the individuals who appears in this film, Mazlan Othman, she's the director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. Back in 2010, there was a story that came out claiming that she was going to be appointed the UN UFO ambassador. And that went back and forth in the mainstream media about whether or not these claims were true or not, and the UN denied that. But it was said that she was appointed to be the UFO ambassador. But she's one of the many scientists, government officials, military people who appear in this film that's set up like a documentary exploring the what-ifs of first contact. Now, of course, many people believe that we're far beyond first contact, but, the mainstream accepted opinion is that has not happened yet. So that's what this film looks at, and it's been getting a lot of press. It's premiering at the Sundance Film Festival, and, it was written up, Hollywood Reporter. I think Filmmaker Magazine listed it as its like number 1 2C at Sundance. So it's getting a lot of attention. And what I like about it is just the fact that it has authentic people in it, like actual people from the military, from the government, talking about encountering extraterrestrials. Kind of fun.
It is so funny you mentioned this film and wanted to talk about it, because it so happens my girlfriend Karen saw this last night at Sundance. She has been planning a ski trip. She had to delay it, all kinds of issues, and she finally was able to get out there. So happened to be at the same time as Sundance. There's an app where you can get into some of the movies, but you have to it's really hard, to do the waitlisting to get in.
Yeah.
But they were able to get into this one and see the Q&A and stuff. So that's kind of funny. And I think you'll be interested in this. She had complaints I can understand.
Yeah.
Because, and she's, like me, has similar perspectives and stuff. And she's not saying that it's not, that they didn't get into ETs or stuff like that. It's more, abductions and stuff or contactees. It's more along the lines of, it's nothing new. It's stuff that people have been talking about for a long time, and they make it seem like, oh, nobody's asked these questions, when they have asked these questions. Like Paul Davies, of course, has been talking, who's unfortunately not in the film, has been talking about this stuff for a long time. And I think you understand, I think there's one advantage for some people, even people we talk to who are mainstream scientists, that have thought about this for years and have much more deep and interesting things to say than the people they had on there who were just kind of thinking about the topic for the first time. So it wasn't anything that was revealing or to her that interesting.
That is so cool that she got to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very interesting. And I had the same reaction when I was reading the description about it and reading the comments from the director. You're right. It's not something that is being explored for the first time. These questions have been tossed around so many times over the years. But, I guess this is somewhat similar to the explosion we've seen in the past 2 weeks with Project Blue Book.
Mm-hmm.
This filmmaker is putting something out, and for some people, they're going to see that, and it's going to be the first time they've seen these issues raised and questions put it on in a movie, and they start their thinking process. Oh yeah, I've never thought about that before. Although these have been addressed many, many times by many, many people. But same with Blue Book. Now all of a sudden, Blue Book is in the public spotlight, and people are, wow, Air Force UFO files. This is pretty cool. Never heard of this. Well, they've been out for decades.
Yeah.
So, I guess it's your audience. There's always going to be an audience that is seeing something for the first time. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. I think they could have had some much more interesting people in this movie, like Mr. Paul Davies.
And Shostak, who always has, Shostak and Davies, I think have some really interesting things to say from, that side of the fence, on this topic. Both
right.
of whom are not in the film, unfortunately.
Right.
But, a really good point that you make there, and there's an example this week in one of the stories. So I wrote about one of my favorite Blue Book files, an unidentified from the Travis Air Force Base, really old, from like the 50s or something. I can't remember what year right now. But anyway, it's a great case. Air Force case, military witnesses, really cool, crazy, light flying around. They don't know what the hell it is. Great case. I write it for our website, and it's kind of like, UFO people are like, historical case, great. They want to know more about what's going on right now. So, but I also posted it on Huffington Post, And it's been getting a ton of attention on the Huffington Post. So kind of like you mentioned with the rest of the Blue Book files, it's like UFO people been there, done that, but the mainstream public hasn't heard of this, and so they are like, whoa, what are you talking about? And so they pay much more attention. So I think that, efforts like this movie will help open some eyes, but I think like Karen, one of her frustrations is especially with, the egos of the scientists and how this happens sometimes, they try to market it as, just like the news did with the Blue Book files, which is completely inaccurate. They try to market it as something new and unique when it really isn't.
Well, and for a lot of people, they're citing to sources that are saying something, and, they view that as being the case without doing additional research.
Yeah.
So, I can understand why a lot of people got it wrong, because a lot of people before them got it wrong.
Yeah.
But it is so cool seeing, now, and a lot of these cases have been covered before, but again, journalists change it at different media outlets, and people doing research or discovering things for the first time themselves, so they write it as something new. But I do love seeing that media outlets in locations around the country are looking at the Blue Book files for their specific city and doing stories about UFO reports in the Blue Book from their location. I mean, it's just spawned just an incredible number of stories about region-specific stories, and I love seeing that.
Yeah, I agree. That is really, really cool. So, and I'll bet you it is making people take a closer and a second look. So, I agree 100%. So, yeah, funny you brought that up, that film.
That's fantastic, and that, again, so cool she got to see it, and what a coincidence.
I know. Yeah, that's funny.
All right, what's your story?
My story is actually a new development regarding the story I brought up last week, and that is these drones or quote-unquote drones, over these nuclear power plants in France. And why is this interesting? Because last week there was a press conference at one of these nuclear power plants. Just to bring people up to date, tons of nuclear power plants in France and one in Belgium have been talking about seeing UFOs over their plant. Sometimes there's a pair of them. So far it has been assumed that they are drones. The authorities say if they are drones, they don't know whose they are. They've been investigating anti-nuclear organizations. Even when I posted this, people are like, it's obviously Greenpeace. Well, Greenpeace has been actively telling these guys that not only is it not them, but this demonstrates whoever it is, you don't know what the hell you're doing. These bases are open to drone attacks. But they've actively now, because this has been going on since October, have investigated with other anti-nuclear organizations, and they haven't been able to discover that it is any of them. They're all denying it, and I think they would probably admit it, because at some point you'd want to make the point, hey, look, we could do this, so could someone else. But these are sophisticated drones. I mean, a drone that can unmanned come fly over a nuclear power plant and take off and nobody knows where it goes or whose it is, that's kind of crazy. So, of course, there have been other witnesses. Some of the witnesses have said, I don't think it is a drone. They've described these lights and these objects. And just this last week, there was a press conference, kind of a State of the Union at one of these nuclear power plants, where the director of the plant was talking about, their progress in 2014 and their future. And he did mention the drones. And he said, unequivocally, these are not drones, they're UFOs. So this nuclear power plant, director has admitted that at least they don't even know if there actually are drones or quadcopters. He called it a UFO. So I think that's really terribly interesting. I think this is just fascinating. Even if they are drones, it's just crazy that this is happening. It's big news in Europe. And in all the European papers, you see a lot about it. But this story has not made it to the U.S. Yet. But it's kind of a big deal. France says they're on high alert over this whole thing.
Whenever we hear a story like this about UFOs over nuclear power plants or any type of, mass sighting or something that's an incredible story like this, we always hope that we hear follow-up to the stories, and rarely is that the case. Mm-hmm. This one, it is awesome to have a follow-up, and I hope we hear more about it too.
I'm sure we will. France, of course, is one of those countries that has an official UFO investigative organization. They work under the CNES, which is the equivalent to NASA. They're in France. And so I'm sure that they're going to be saying something at some point, because this is really big news, and the press and everybody is pressing the French government over this issue. So I think the story will make it here in the U.S., and I think we're going to see it's not going to go away. I think this will be a bigger and bigger story until they figure out what's going on, if they figure it out.
Well, I hope that's the case, and it sounds like it really should be. This is an interesting story with lots to follow up on. But we've seen it so many times in the past with stories like this, where pretty incredible sighting, and then one random media outlet will, for really no good reason at all, will say, oh yeah, they found out it was Chinese lanterns, and then everybody else would just drop the story at that. Right. And when you actually look at their claims, the sources, or their lack of sources, you find out that's not the case. I think of the case of the Chinese lanterns on the border of, what was that, India, I think?
Yeah.
The China-India border. And, they were mysterious UFO sightings by the military. They were investigated by the military and the police. And one media source said that they were done investigating it. They found out it was Chinese lanterns. But that was never the case at all, and the government was still investigating it, never found the source for it. But people saw the one report that said, oh yeah, Chinese lanterns, and the whole thing was dropped, and no media outlet had interested in it anymore. Yeah,
they've dropped it and nothing since.
Yeah. So I hope that doesn't happen with this case.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you don't think it will, so let's hope for that.
Yeah, I think we're going to hear more about that. So pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's a great story.
All right. Well, did you have any other news you wanted to talk about?
No, sir. Other than the fact that I am extremely excited for the UFO Congress. That's my news. Yeah.
That is good news. Good news, brother.
Oh, yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk to Michael Carter. I am happy to welcome back to the show Michael Carter. Hello.
Hey, brother. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thanks for having me on.
In fact, we've been so busy because we've got conference coming up, all this stuff. You're only the second show of the year for us.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
So starting off the new year, and you're starting off with a brand new book. So we had you on before. We talked about alien scriptures, UFOs and the Bible, and you've got a new book called A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness.
Yes, it's a very highfalutin title, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So exciting.
It is. I felt that ancient astronauts, it was time to go to the next step, because as you know, with Ancient Aliens and all the other shows that explore this topic, or the other people that explore this topic, we get it now that most likely the God that we thought was God is an off-world intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
But then I felt that let's go to the next step. Are we actually saying that the creator or creation is an astronaut? I don't think so, but we can unpack that a little more in the show. So that's why I wrote this book, to get people talking about, well, okay, now we know that Yahweh is probably, an astronaut. What does that mean, that for those who believe in God, that God is an astronaut?
And that's a great question. So when it comes to your thoughts on God, I guess, do you mean what people write about was probably an extraterrestrial in nature, or do you feel that it is a more intelligent extraterrestrial being then?
Well, I'm still wrestling with that, Alejandro, but this is where I come down. I think and I feel that creation is an energy. It's an intelligence. It's not anthropomorphic. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get jealous like Yahweh does. It doesn't, have a list of rules for you and that kind of thing. I think that as I do in the first book, we've mistaken an astronaut for the intelligence that kind of holds everything together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, exploring a little more deeply into Palladian cosmology, and specifically the Talmud of Germanuel, Billy Meyer's text. Germanuel, who we know as Jesus, posits that there is a God with a small g who is an advanced extraterrestrial humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
But above that, if we're thinking of a hierarchy, there is something called creation, which is an energy, which is an intelligence. You can't even put words to it. And that's what I'm talking about connecting with. Because we look at what's going on in the world now,
Mm-hmm.
and even Stevie Wonder can see that we're having all these conflicts, which are basically, yes, there's oil, there's resources, but these are religious conflicts. And if we look at Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, religions of the book, they're all based on the teachings or the presence of an extraterrestrial. And I find that troubling.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to unlearn what we've learned in certain ways.
Mm-hmm. And when you say the teachings of an extraterrestrial, what brings you to that belief? Like, you say that with a pretty strong certainty.
Okay, well, I look in the First Testament,
Mm-hmm.
and Yahweh gives the list of 10 commandments. Those commandments only were for the Jewish people, because there's no Jewish religion until after the Exodus. And so you shouldn't have other gods before me. You shouldn't murder. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't covet your neighbor's belongings. You don't sleep with your neighbor's wife. These are all great things.
Mm-hmm.
But they were only for the Jewish people, because otherwise they wouldn't go into the land of milk and honey. And what do? They take those people's belongings. They kill men, women, and children. The exact things that they're not supposed to do, they do because of the other. They're not of our tribe.
Mm-hmm.
We don't intermarry. We don't hobnob with the goyim, the uncircumcised. We don't do that. And so you have an us versus them attitude from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. So they felt that these rules were only for us and on how we treat our people, our neighbors.
They were. Because remember, they go into the promised land.
Yeah.
But they rape and pillage and steal. They did much like what happened to Native Americans.
And so they felt that they didn't have to adhere to these rules when it came to dealing with others.
They didn't.
Right.
They didn't. I mean, there's some horrible stories and incidents in the Old Testament where men, women, and children are killed, where Yahweh has a temper tantrum. I'm looking in Jeremiah now, chapter 13, verse 14, and this is in the Hebrew translation. Yahweh says, "And I will smash them one against the other, parents and children alike, declares the Lord. No pity, compassion, or mercy will stop me from destroying them." I find it difficult to worship a being who would do that, to throw babies up. Yeah. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying religion is bad.
Right.
No. I'm just saying that genuine religion's not bad. But if we're basing it on, these biblical traditions, a lot of it is us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
One could argue that when Jesus comes along, he could be talking about a very different God. We could argue that. Now, we don't have the time, but because he's saying, bring your A game. He's saying Moses told you, A, but I'm telling you, you love your enemies. You forgive those who spitefully use you. That's a far cry from what we're seeing with Yahweh.
Mm-hmm. So you think these messages from this Yahweh were genuine messages, but from some being, and some being that, which you say, I think you used the term dangerous earlier, some being who didn't have, who wasn't very nice.
I mean, and he doesn't want you worshiping other gods. Not because, as people say, well, you don't want to worship money or sex, no, you don't want to worship any of that. But there were other gods in the region. There were other extraterrestrials in the region. They were divvying up, and of course, Zachariah Sitchin's work gets into this in much more depth. They were divvying up that part of the world. And so here we have, down to this day, if you don't believe in what I believe in, or who I believe in, then you're an infidel. Or, we have this Islamophobic thing going on in the world now. I mean, we're like fighting the Crusades all over again. Just like our country's still fighting the Civil War, we're still fighting the Crusades. The stakes are higher. And so in the new book, I think that we need to go, there's a tradition of people saying, you know what? I'm not getting into that. There's another way to connect with a creation, with nature, with the cosmos, and it doesn't involve priests. It doesn't, gnosis, knowing yourself. There are mystical things we could do, whether it's through meditation or contemplation. There are other ways to connect with the divine that promote unity as opposed to separation.
Well, and you do a lot of speaking. I mean, you're a reverend.
Yes.
You've been a chaplain at different church or at different hospitals.
Yes.
And so when you go out and you speak with people, do you get into this kind of stuff?
No, that's a great question. I do not have a UFO church. I'm not trying to start anything like that. But I believe that for me, the teachings of Jesus are paramount. Now, it doesn't mean, I'm very eclectic in my spiritual views, but I know that love unites. And if it's not coming from love, it divides. Now, there are other ways. There are other paths. And so I don't get into UFOs or off-world intelligences, but I do talk about the power of love. I do talk about human evolution, how we're to grow, how we're to go past the illusion that we're separate from one another. Because basically, those teachings do come from off-world intelligences. If we talk about Jesus, we could argue that either he was a hybrid or he had close friends from off-world intelligences. And the message he brings is, how do I coexist with other human beings? How do I live out my oneness with God, if you want to use that word, if you want to use the word creation, universal mind, Allah, Brahman, call it what you will. And so I'm trying to get people to say there's a new world if you can take it. That these beings that we are being visited by, I can't say all of them are. I can say from the ones that I've had contact with, they're not here to take your sperm or ovum or give you, or do rectal probes. They're not here for that. They're here to help humankind go to the next stage of evolution. But we fight too much. We're very violent. If my hair is nappier than yours, or my nose is wider, or I'm a different color, these superficial things cause great consternation here. And for some of these beings, they're like, we don't really get it. And in order for you to mature, you're going to have to go through a spiritual metamorphosis. You're going to have to raise your vibration. You're going to have to see past the illusions that some of your religious leaders and your politicos are telling you.
Well, and using what we talked about earlier, it sounds like we've also then, Do you feel this way? We've been led down the wrong path by other off-world intelligences, such as whoever Yahweh was.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. You know, there are people who have had contact with other intelligences who were not as benevolent. I'm not like brother Stephen Greer and some other folk who they're all here to sing Kumbaya. I don't know if that's true. Just like all people aren't here to hold your hands and sing Kumbaya. Mm-hmm. But the beings that I have been in contact with, and not just me. You know, John Mack was talking to people who were saying, hey, you know what? Some of these people, these beings are here to help us go to the next step in our evolution. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that that's what we need to be focusing on, because we now have the means to destroy ourselves.
Well,
and this planet.
I wonder, these beings that are coming telling you, you know, that we're fighting, that we need to get over these things to move to the next level, do they feel incumbent upon themselves, or do they suggest how you deal with the negative influences that are off-world influences?
Well, I'm not understanding your question. When you
say like Yahweh, let's say Yahweh,
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
No, from my experiences, listen, it's quantum physics, okay? What you focus on, you create. Mm-hmm. If you're broke and you keep focusing on, I don't have money, you just create the more scenario that I don't have money. So what it is that we have to focus on the world we want to create. Mm-hmm. And the way we do that is not by changing the world, but by changing ourselves. By looking inside ourselves and finding out what our fear of difference. Maybe it's money, maybe it's sex, maybe it's a whole bunch of things. But we have to unlearn what we've learned, because it's not going to be this great, all 8 billion people on the planet are just all of a sudden going to go to this new vibration. It's one person at a time. Mm-hmm. And when we're so focused on what other people are doing, but we don't focus on ourselves, because we don't want to look at it. We don't want to look at our fears and our biases and our prejudices. It's not pretty. But in order to grow up and go to that next stage, it's the journey without distance, and it's an inward journey. And each one of us, because life is about evolution, life is about evolving. And so that's what we're going to have to do. Each person in his or her own way. To create the world we want, we have to be the people we want to be. Gandhi said it best. Be the change you want to see in the world. I can't control the Putin. I can't control Speaker Boehner or Obama, or, that's out of my pay grade. But I can work on myself and work on the people and try to treat the people in my sphere of influence the best I can. Mm-hmm. I can try to serve the hungry. I can try to clothe the naked. I can do those things. And of course, working on myself. But I talk to people every day and they feel so overwhelmed. And I understand that. But you're only overwhelmed because you're worrying about things you have no control over. That's why the serenity prayer is so powerful. Give me the wisdom, and grant me the wisdom to do the things that I can do, and not know and being able to accept what I can't. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of work to do right here, right now.
So you're kind of saying then there are multiple off-world influences with different perspectives and motivations, but that we need to use our own discernment to know which direction to follow.
Well, yes, by their fruits you shall know them, a wise rabbi once said. Because the thing is that that's what you have to use, your own spiritual discernment. And just because somebody is dead and comes back in a spirit form, or just because someone comes from another dimension or planet, doesn't mean they're smarter than you. That doesn't mean that at all. And we give our power away so easily. But everything we need to know, we know inside. And you can call that the kingdom of heaven within. You can call that the Brahman. You can call it God. You can call it what you want. But we've been taught to look outside ourselves for salvation, for anything we want. But we need to look within. This is what the Buddha talks about. He says everything that we are is the result of our thoughts. Now, he said this 500 years before Jesus. That what we think, what we create, thoughts are things. So we create our reality. That's what I'm saying.
Well, one of the
that we think we are. Yeah. Sorry.
No, this is really interesting. I mean, it's funny because, James Gill and him being who he is, we had similar discussions just a couple of minutes ago on a show that will air, a couple days before this show. But yeah, because this one airs Monday. But yeah, tomorrow in the real timeline. But it's sort of, and this is kind of. When it comes to me personally, and I'd like to know your perspective given what we've said, I think a lot about, I would call myself an agnostic philosophically. I align very much with what the Buddha says, and Buddhism, but of course, as you mentioned, a lot of those philosophies are similar to, Indian philosophies, Native American philosophies, and Jesus and his philosophies.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, for me, I build discernment and my path by using your terms, looking for the kingdom of heaven within, at which then doesn't make the off-world, if there are off-world messages, they're just messages like any other. There's nothing unique, essentially, about them. In other words, you still have to apply your discernment like you would with your neighbor coming over and telling you something. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do. That's why I don't get caught up in what people say they believe in. I know what you believe by how you treat me. You can have prayer. You can have Bible study every Wednesday night. You can go to the temple and the mosque every Friday night. You can celebrate Shabbos. That's all good. Services on Sunday. But I know sometimes the most difficult people in the world do all of those things. So I know what you believe by how you treat me and the parent. Now, by how you treat me and the planet. Now, you say there's nothing kind of new. No, there's nothing new. I'm not telling you anything that George Adamski wasn't talking about, Billy Meyer, other folk. But it may not be new, but look how difficult it is to do. Because pick up a newspaper.
Well, even going further back, though, nothing new. And regardless of those people, I think what you're saying is we've had these off-world influences going far back into the past.
Yeah. Look, the book of Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. And we've had messengers come. Whether with Dr. King, the movie Selma now, we've had Gandhi, we've had Joan of Arc. We've had people come with this message of oneness. There's the law of oneness. And anything that separates us is an illusion. But we can't seem to get by it. And a lot of times it's because of religion. Everybody knows what God or creation is thinking. It's almost like they talk to to him, her, she, it every day. And so it can't help but be us and them. And that's tearing us apart.
Well, there's a couple things a lot that comes to mind when we're talking about this. And you brought up some names that I think are similar. I do a talk about ETs and religion, and I talk about how religions view the extraterrestrial possibilities, most being very, welcoming, actually. Also about, if people really freak out religious or how it'll affect their religions if it's openly discovered. But also the similarities between religion and like ufology or belief in extraterrestrials and kind of how it's evolved and is changing or spawning future religions. And there are similarities, good and bad, that go forward. So, for instance, like we talk about, religion, is this idea of a supernatural force, unseen force that's able to give you messages or guide us, which, is similar. We're talking about these extraterrestrials we can't see or anything, but these can be good or bad. If you take an idea of Heaven's Gate, of course, that didn't end well. And even when you talk about Billy Meyer, this is an example of a group of people, and you talked about Stephen Greer. These are groups of people that are very polarizing, in that they say ours is the true prophet, and you follow us, or you're with us or against us.
Well, again, I don't know if that's true.
Well, I think being in this field, it's certainly true. You could ask those individuals and read what those individuals write about, and it's very similar to religious texts. I'm the true prophet. I'm the one communicating with them. Anybody else is wrong and leading you down the wrong path. So,
okay. Well, even if that's true,
yeah.
And the only reason I'm not saying that you're lying. What I'm saying is I don't know Dr. Greer that well that's what he's promoting. I don't know Billy Meyer. But what I say, but you do.
And I'm not judging it. I'm just drawing similarities.
No, I hear you. No, I know you're not implying that. But what I'm saying is that you can't control that. But what you can do is use your own discernment. Mm-hmm. Anything that divides is not coming from love. Mm-hmm. And it's really that simple. Anything that says, I have this and you don't, you can see where that's coming from. There are always going to be people who are going to come off and say, I have the only way. There's always going to be that. Mm-hmm. But that's why you have your own spiritual discernment. Mm-hmm.
See now,
you can't have it all laid out for you. You got to trust yourself a little bit and take some risks. And sometimes you'll get got, and sometimes you won't.
See now, what I'm saying here, even though the way it's packaged is kind of different, what you're saying right now is so extremely important, and especially for people in this field, because you can't follow another, if you don't use your discernment, there will be people like I think their names were the Nettles and Heaven's Gate, which will come try to tell you, I've got the true word, I've got the true message, turn your brain off and just listen to me.
Right. You're right.
Which is what religions do, so people have to be very careful.
They do. And you can tell and that's what I'm saying. And listen, I think that genuine religion is a good thing, but it's been so bastardized. That's why you have people saying, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Call it what you will. But you've made my point for me, brother, because you have to go within. You have to learn to trust. And that's not going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But, it means we have to what? Slow down. Sit quietly sometimes. Do some reading, do some studying. It may take going to therapy. It may take whatever it takes to unpeel the onion. So people will find out, you know what? I'm not really who I think I was. I don't, I need to find, I'm just what people tell me I am. That's why you hear the term sheeple, because people just follow. And so that's what the journey is about. It's the hero's journey. It's the shero's journey. And I don't care whether you've had contact with space people or not. Irregardless of that. This is the journey of the human soul. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen eventually. You can either go kicking and screaming, or you can get on with the program, because life is about moving on. And you'll become a dinosaur. It's, it's like people want to keep us in the 1950s. They want to keep women barefoot and pregnant. Everybody, the immigrants, that's what they're doing. They're stuck in a paradigm that's just outmoded. And we're not going to go backwards. Mm-hmm. Life doesn't go backwards.
Yeah. And you know what you're saying reminds me, especially when you bring up hero's journey, and I love the Shiro's journey. I haven't heard that term before, which stems from Joseph Campbell,
Yes.
who essentially talked about mythology. And the point is, and the reason I bring this up is because I don't want your message, which I think is important, to get lost on people just because they are polarized by being in one camp or another. Because Joseph Campbell talks about these things, these universal truths are wrapped in mythologies of many, 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 many sorts.
Yes.
To be palatable. I've heard the Dalai Lama talk along these lines as well. And that, the Dalai Lama talks about how it doesn't matter how it's packaged. And he even says, if you were born, let's say Roman Catholic, stay Roman Catholic.
Exactly.
Don't become a Buddhist. He's like, because you've got the message, it's wrapped in there. Just be careful and understand that these mythologies are about these roots, don't misguide. I think he's even said the trappings for the actual message. So the ritual's not important. What the ritual is representing is important.
Yes.
And so whether it's Billy Meyer or whoever else or Jesus or Allah, who's the mythology or the trappings of those messages that you have, just don't forget the message.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't agree with every word that Jesus is quoted as saying in the New Testament. I don't agree with that, but it's not about getting lost in, what? If someone's going to attack my family, man, I'm going to be violent. I'm going to protect them.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to turn the other cheek and say, here, hit me again. No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And that's just common sense.
Right.
I don't think if someone gets caught in adultery that you stone them to death. That's what they did back then. They were ignorant.
Yeah.
No, but it's the essence of the message. That's what, and I don't think Jesus said you should stone them to death. So I don't want, for those listening, no. But just because Moses said that, you don't do that. So you have to use your common sense. You use your own sense of self, your connection to whatever you want to call it, God, he, she, it, the Allah, whoever, the mind, the universal one, whatever you want to call it. But you have to know that I can only change myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go from tolerance to acceptance. My sister is an evangelical Christian. It used to bug me. I was intolerant of her intolerance. I mean, isn't that crazy? So we're both in this kind of wheel of suffering. And I just had to let that go. We just have different ways of getting to the same place. But I was trying to change her. Hey, I'm right. That's basically what I was saying. I wasn't saying it that way. You should be more accepting. You should be more tolerant. I was shooting all over her. That's not where she is this lifetime. Now that can change, but that's not where she is. And I'm not saying, look, there are people much more evolved than me. And I'm sure they go, we love you, Michael, but this is just where you are. So it's not this self-righteousness, but we have to learn to accept each other. How many times have you been in a conversation with someone and you're having a conversation, but then the conversation gets to be they're trying to convince you that they're right? It doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm. You
feel like you're not being heard. I tell people, if what I say does not resonate, please don't buy the book. Please turn your radio off. Because, if it doesn't resonate, why make yourself agitated? I don't try to convince people of my experiences anymore. I just don't, I just don't have the time or the energy. I realize that if people need to hear it, they will hear it. They'll hear it.
And so I'm curious now, because, these messages which you're talking about, which I think are so important, are kind of framed in this extraterrestrial frame. And how does that play a role then in? How do you connect that? Do you connect that as these off-worlders, for lack of a better word, are brothers and sisters in this, and following a path of discovery just like we are?
I do. Some are more evolved, some are less evolved. They are, as the Dalai Lama would say, they are sentient beings. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, there was something on Facebook. It's been going on back and forth. You may want to check it out. The Dalai Lama gives his opinion on contact with off-world intelligences. Mm-hmm. And he comes to, they're sentient beings. And they are in various stages of evolution, as we all are. Mm-hmm. And that helps me from, yes, there's different technology, obviously, there's different levels of spirituality, how they run their families, those types of things. But if I think of them otherwise, then they're the other. And then I go into xenophobia and my fear kicks in and I start looking at the differences as opposed to what would probably bring us together. But that's difficult because we can't even do that with human beings. Mm-hmm. Now the game is now the game is higher. Now the stakes are higher.
Right. So a big part of your book is you have a chapter on atheists, and I to be honest, I wasn't able to get to that part. But okay. What's kind of the message in that chapter?
Okay, first of all, that I have known atheists that have treated me better than people who say they believe in God. That's number one. Okay, and I really mean that.
Yeah, I know. I'm really into the idea of, secular morality, and it's possible, right. And there are studies that show that secular families are more moral. My sermon this Sunday is about humanism and atheism and what have you. But I know people who say they're agnostic. Okay. And some atheists. And what I hear them saying is, I don't know if there's a God. I don't know if I believe in a God. But if I did believe in a God, it would not believe in the God that you believe in. The God that is Santa Claus, that punishes me if I'm naughty and rewards me if I'm nice. The God that's going to barbecue me in eternity because I don't believe everything this God says. And I say, we need to listen to that. Mm-hmm. That's what
that chapter is about. That then, even if they don't believe in a God, what they are trying to say is, look, you're an adult. Listen to what you're saying. Look at what you're doing in the name of this deity. I think it's a powerful message if we can get past being offended.
Yeah.
Like on Facebook, I saw they posted something wonderful. Just because you're offended doesn't make it right. Just because you're offended by what I say doesn't make you right.
Yeah.
And so that's basically what that chapter is about. It's for the atheists. And you can live an ethical, moral, and I would use the word even spiritual life and not believe in a God at all, because it's not the God that we're fighting, that we're fighting for now, fighting over. Mm-hmm. You can live a life being one with nature. You can live a life that focuses on, I don't know if there's an afterlife, but I don't care about that. I'm concerned with this life and how well I'm living this life and how I'm reaching out to people. That's a powerful way to live. Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with a God. So you can live that way without believing in something greater than yourself, and you can live that way with that. But it really is about how you live your life. Mm. I say it again. I'll know what you believe by how you treat me.
Yeah. And it's funny that you when you talk about this, when I say I'm agnostic, and if, when people get frustrated, in my mind, it's a respectful thing, because it's not that I'm disrespecting you and your beliefs. It's that I'm respecting you and everyone else's beliefs. I don't know, so I don't want to say I believe you and not anyone else. I want to say any of these are a possibility. I don't want to discount any of these possibilities.
But it's also you're respecting yourself by saying, this is who I am. You want me to accept you, then you need to accept me. And people don't like to live. It's hard for people to live in mystery. What does the Lakota, their name for God, Wankatonkan, means the great mystery. See, in the West, we don't know how to live in mystery. We have to know everything.
Yeah.
And you can't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's hubris. And the people who think they know everything are killing each other.
Right.
And they'll kill you if you don't watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm coming from, brother. And that's what this book is about. I don't agree with everything Billy Meyer says, but there's some kernels of truth there that call me back to myself. And whether it's Meyer, whether it's Jesus, whether it's, now some people freak out. How can you compare the two? It's not about comparing the two. They're both human beings. It's about the wisdom and the teachings that they impart.
Yeah. They're both humans with hearts, and you know what? People know I'm skeptical of Billy Meyer. I've had people on where we've discussed it, but what compelled me early on to look so deeply into all of it is there are some kernels of wisdom there that I found inspiring and that I appreciated.
Yes, and that's all I'm saying. Yes, the jury's out. The jury's still out for me on some of George Adamski's stuff. Mm-hmm. But that message of love, that message of, if you don't stop if you don't stop splitting the atom, you're going to be in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
The messages are not new. It's just that now we really need to start listening to them because, again, we it doesn't have to happen. We can create the world we want, I believe. But we also, as Dr. King said, if we don't, we need to learn to live together as brothers or sisters, or we will perish together as fools.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about this. I think this is a really interesting statistic. It comes from Dr. Ted Peters. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Theologian, and he did a study on religions and how they would be affected. What he found was really interesting. It was mostly the atheists who felt that people who were religious were going to have a big problem if it was announced there were extraterrestrials. Ted Peters found that really that no religion is going to be that affected. Most people will be able to accept this and move on without a problem. But especially the atheists were certain. All religions thought that, well, to some degree, that, the other guys are going to be in trouble. The Catholics thought the Mormons would be in trouble. The Mormons thought the Muslims would be in trouble. And, they were all kind of like that. But what do you think of that perspective?
I think it's a good perspective. I think there's some truth to it. Listen, when I first started talking about this, evangelical Christians wouldn't even listen. Now, not all of them, people, Marzulli and a few others, now they're saying, okay, you're right. There are extraterrestrials, but they're all Nephilim. They're all fallen angels. Okay, human evolution is slow. At least they went from not believing to they admit it. Mm-hmm. It's happening now. The Pope talks about it.
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama is talking about it. The world's not going to cave in. Look at all the countries that have disclosed their government papers. I think that those people some people sincerely believe that the people will freak out, but there are a lot of people who say that, at least in our country, because they're not ready to disclose it. Because listen, man, the whole world's going to change. We're going to be talking about free energy. We're going to be talking about being able to cure diseases with this technology. A lot of these oil companies and stuff, they're going to have a problem. So people are not in a hurry to lose that power. Look, we just found out 80 people own half of the planet's wealth.
Mm-hmm.
That's not when there's a big announcement, but disclosure's going on right now. Come on. People, shows like the one I'm on, Ancient Aliens. The reason why it's been on for 7 seasons is because people know, they believe it's tapped into something.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So I don't think the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket, but I do think those in power, those who still want to use fossil fuels, those who still want to treat sickness instead of dealing with health. Those people who are in power, oil companies and whatever, Wall Street, they're not going to be quick to want this to happen because they're in power. They're privileged.
Yeah.
And at least some of the ETs, they're talking about a world without that kind of strife. They're talking about a world where resources are shared. They're talking about a world where you get over it if someone's from Mexico or Africa or Appalachia. That's the world they're talking about, but we can't create it.
And are these the messages that you personally have received as well?
Yes, from 3 different races. From a reptilian race, they weren't grays, but they looked like them. They were chalk colored, and from a Nordic looking people. Mm-hmm. And they're saying the same thing. And the reason I give you the races is because we hear people say, well, those grays, well, those reptilians, they're all bad. Those black people, boy, those immigrants. You know what I mean? We do the same thing with each other that we do with them. We just paint a whole picture. All the reptilians are evil. They're all fallen angels. All the grays, please don't let your daughter marry one. Well, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So your book, the last part of your book, the title is Evolution of Human Consciousness. And we've been talking a lot about individual evolution. But do you feel then there is an overall evolution underway?
Yes, I see it. I see it. I see it with people talking about minimum wage. Mm-hmm. I see it, people pushing back about abortion. Now we got this thing with abortion coming up again. People are pushing back. Police brutality. You got gay brothers and sisters out there. You got white brothers. You got Latina brothers and sisters. You got African Americans. We're all coming together. It's a new day. Now, is it going to be easy? No. No. Because the old paradigm doesn't want to give up power. Mm-hmm. But there's a new consciousness now. That what happens to you is going to affect me. And quite frankly, I'm excited about it.
Mm-hmm. So you're going to be able to take it.
And run with it.
Uh-huh. So, and speaking of and it gets hard, I guess, because, I like to think that way, but, and I think you got to have the yin and the yang, because you see so much strife out there. Of course, so many countries, Africa, the Middle East, even, parts of, you take the Ukraine or something like that.
Oh my God.
So much, and some of these places just terrible, awful things happening at a pretty grand scale.
Right. You're right. But guess what, brother? I said it at the top of the show. You can't do anything about that. Mm-hmm. What you can do through your meditation, through your lotus meditations, or, whatever you want to call it, opening up your heart, you change yourself and you change the vibration around you and the people around you. That's all you're responsible for. If you start worrying about, I'm not saying don't be an informed citizen. I'm not saying maybe you can write a check. Maybe you do some volunteer work. Maybe you join the Peace Corps. Whatever the spirit is, but you're not here to do all that. You can't do all that. It's overwhelming. But you can be the change you want to see. I go out here tomorrow. I'm kind to people. I'm meditating. I'm doing yoga. I'm doing things to expand my consciousness. Don't get caught in the hype. Do what you can do. You hear it in sports. Play within yourself. Play within your means. You're not going to change your crazy situation. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to. But when you leave there today, maybe you see someone you haven't seen in a while. You give them a kind word. Maybe you write a check for something. That's how the world changes. You have to change yourself. A Course in Miracles says you don't have to change the world. You change your mind about the world. It's quantum physics.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts are things. Is the world going to hell in a handbasket? Or is this a trying time? Is this a time like a woman having a baby? And we're giving birth to a new world. It's up to you how you want to look at it. But the way you look at it will affect how you deal with it.
Do you think we're at a critical moment then? Do you think we're close on the cusp of a switch of a?
Yeah, I do. I think that what we do now will be affecting us for generations to come. But I also see, like I said a moment ago, I see many people choosing love over fear. And that's what it's about for each and every one of us. Every moment I get a chance to choose love over fear. And sometimes I choose fear. But I get up and I dust myself off and I say, I've learned from that. I'm going to move on. That's evolution. Not that you don't make mistakes, but that you learn from them. Not that I'm not afraid, but that I look at my fear. One of the biggest things I had to go through, and I still go through, is when I get up at night or I wake up and there's a being in my room, I have to get over the fear. Now, it's only natural to be afraid, but the fear that would keep me from getting the message, the fear that would keep me from being able to reach out, I have to get over that fear. There's the metaphor. And I live my life less fearfully. Now, there is a fear. Of course, you wake up in the morning and you see someone who looks like a bug or something in your room. Of course, that's going to get your attention. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fear that keeps me from moving onward or getting something from that experience, even if it's something I don't want.
It's speaking of, your personal fears and communications and things like this. How do you deal then, just personally, I'm curious, when you share with someone that you believe that you are communicating with extraterrestrials, you must have some fear of how they're going to take that message.
I really don't. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on TV. I mean, it's out there.
Did you at one point have some trepidation about it?
Oh, yes. Alejandro, listen, man, it took me 10, 15 years until my first publisher said, look, you've got to tell your story. But yeah, I mean, even with family and stuff like that. Yeah. But I don't care now. I'm 58 years young. I'm closer to the end of my story than the beginning. And that's even if I live another 80 years. But what I do, I don't try to convince.
Yeah.
I don't, so there's no threat for me. If people say, people have said that, oh, come on, man, what are you, crazy? I say, well, maybe I am, but this is my truth. And I leave it there. I leave it there. I got nothing really left to lose.
Yeah.
But the point is, look how many people have the same experience I have. Listen, we all can't be wrong.
Well, and how would you advise, let's say, a younger person who has these issues, who's like, I believe this is happening, but I am afraid to share it with anybody?
I would advise them to get in touch with me. I can send them to some support groups. I can do that. That's part of what I do. Me at Michael J.S. Carter at charter.net. You can go to michaeljscarter.com, Reverend michaeljscarter.com. My contact information is there. Not unless they know someone in their immediate vicinity, and we can go from there, because that's what helped me. I mean, I had Bud Hopkins had regressed me. Bud, the late Bud Hopkins, the late Gene Mundy, they regressed me, but I had to go to a support group, because I thought I needed to be on medication. I mean, I was fearing for my sanity. And, I had a wife then.
So, and how did she feel about it?
She was very open to it. That's my first wife. My wife now is very open to it as well. And I have a 9-year-old child. We have a 9-year-old child. But it helped. I mean, she's had her own experiences, but that's for her to talk about or not talk about. But, yeah, it helps. It helps to go it's like you go to a 12-step program. You go where you're not shamed, that people are there to support you and not judge you. And there are places like that. So that you're not alone. But if they want to call me, I just gave them the information. They can get my book on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles and Kindle or softcover. And, it's a journey. But shows like this, people like you help make the burden a little less because you're open and you're talking to people and so you are doing a great service. It takes courage to do what you do. You talk about me. Hey man, look what you're doing. If I'm a nut, you're the king of nuts because you're having a show.
That's right. So we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you one more question around, and we kind of touched on it earlier, but so do you also then feel we're on the cusp of, open communication with other civilizations out there?
I think we are. We have some of the United Kingdom, Mexico, Brazil, so far ahead of us, Australia, releasing some of their UFO files. You have the Pope talking about it. You have people in the military talking about it. Robert Hastings' wonderful book, UFOs and Nukes. I mean, John Mack's work, it's there. People like me, we've seen these beings face to face. They're flying in our skies with impunity. They're shutting down our nuclear facilities. Now, I hear what you're saying. Is there going to be an official announcement? I don't know, but I know we can't wait for that, and disclosure is already happening.
Mm-hmm.
Already happening. When 50% of the American people believe that we're not alone in the universe. When 48 to 50% of the American people believe the American government is lying or not telling all they know. It's right there, brother. It's right there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I feel like I have gone to church and been part of a wonderful sermon. It's a good way to start my weekend. You've gave me a lot to think about and helped me reset, because especially right now it gets really hard. And sometimes you have those times where there's a lot of detractors out there, and so some of these messages, the simplest messages, seem to be the most important, huh?
Yeah, and they're the hardest to see past the illusion. But yeah, and I'll try to catch you tomorrow night. Wonderful article on Facebook. If you guys haven't been on it, look. Brother Rojas has written a wonderful article about sightings over Travis, the Travis Air Force Base. And listen, Alexandra, keep up the good work. Send me a link, brother, so I can turn people on to the show Monday.
Okay, yeah, definitely will. And of course, as you said, people can go to Amazon and you can look for Alien Scriptures.
Right.
Pretty cool. Your reviews there are really good. That's wonderful.
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
And the New World, if you can take it. They can pick both of them up.
Yep, both at Amazon. And I just wanted to repeat one more time too. MichaelJSCarter.com is the website.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Listen, brother, blessings to you.
Thank you so much to Michael Carter for coming on the show. Some of the things like we talked about Billy Meyer or whatever, and people know, like I said, that I'm skeptical of that case. But, I think like he says, the root, of the messages is what's so important. And, I really like talking to Reverend Carter. So thank you so much for being on the show again. And, you can go read more about him at michaeljscarter.com. And like he said, his books are also on Amazon.com. So I had a lot of fun talking to him. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us once again. Don't forget to check out the UFO Congress at ufocongress.com. I'll talk more about that, in the future, but I've talked a lot about it lately, and so did Jason at the beginning. But yeah, we're just so excited about all these speakers and everything going on. So we're getting so many people, so it's going to be another big one. So a lot of fun there. And of course, the host hotel is sold out, but there's other close hotels. The hotels are getting sold out in the entire town. So, but there are some places. If you have any problem, feel free to email us, and we can let you know, where we know of some good deals. So, before you just don't come, let us know. Email us, and we can tell you where you can stay. So, no problem there. It's getting to be like the Sundance Film Festival, where the whole town is just UFO crazy. So that's a lot of fun. it's a fun environment to be in when you have just hundreds and hundreds of UFOers all around you and like-minded people. So UFOcongress.com. Of course, all of those stories that Jason and I talked about will be at openminds.tv. You can see them there. And spacing out, we're doing it bi-weekly. So we had one last week, and we won't have one this week, but you can find that at the Open Minds TV YouTube. We're doing it bi-weekly only until the conference, and we're doing that because we're so busy with the conference. But we'll have that back to weekly as soon as a week or two after the conference, as soon as we recover from the Congress, because as you can imagine, Jason and Maureen and I and our wonderful volunteers are working, something like 18-hour days or something. We're just so busy at the conference, but we will recover and bounce back and be right back with you. And of course, we'll have some great media, some tweeting, some videos that we'll have from the conference and that we'll be putting out during that week. So stay tuned at openminds.tv. Thank you to Caleb Higgs for the open and close music. You can go to our radio page and see links to his Clerk Chronicles, where he shares his magnificent music, and you can download it for free. You can also see, I'll put up a link today, that we're on Stitcher. I guess this is a popular podcast